Welcome back to This is VANCOLOUR. Sticking to housing tonight, it feels like construction is everywhere in Vancouver. But are we actually building enough homes? Do developers see Vancouver and BC as a profitable place to invest? Here to discuss a VANCOLOUR fan favorite, real estate agent, analyst, commentator, and advisor to policymakers. His business is among the top 1% of Greater Vancouver realtors, and his weekly newsletter reaches several thousand readers. The founder of the Saretsky Group, he is Steve Saretsky. Steve, so nice to see you tonight.
Thanks for having me on. Yeah.
Okay, so I got to ask. I feel like I see construction everywhere. It's jamming me up when I'm driving or trying to get around this city.
Yeah.
But you're saying that we're actually planting the seeds for the next housing shortage in Vancouver. So explain to me these two things and how they can exist at once.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I think, what we have today is we have basically, you have to kind of understand the pipeline of construction, which is to say that how that pipeline works is first things first is you go out and you acquire the land. Then you go and pre-sell your construction units. Then once you get enough pre-construction units, the banks will give you financing to actually put a hole in the ground and start building. Mm-hmm. So everything that you're seeing being built today was already basically pre-sold. It's got its financing. It's already so far in the pipeline that you push through regardless of the economic conditions and you build. Now, we have a record number of units that are currently in the pipeline being constructed. But what we're seeing on the ground today is the inability to pre-sell units. And if you cannot pre-sell units today, what you'll see is nothing gets built 3 years from now, 4 years from now, 5 years from now. So we're going to be relatively well supplied for the next few years, but we're sowing the seeds for the next shortfall probably about 5 or 6 years from now.
So then what happened in those few years where there was, all this pre-financing and construction being developed, and now not so much in terms of new projects? What happened?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the music turned off. The interest rates, of course, went from 0 to 5% in a span of 18 months. So that killed a lot of the viability of the projects. Not only that, but obviously investor sentiment and appetite, right? I mean, you think about a pre-construction condo tower. Typically speaking, you're going to pre-sell that 4 or 5 years in advance of completion. So the reality is most people that are willing to put down, say, 10 or 20% and wait 5 years, you got to kind of be patient money. And so the reality is you're typically an investor. About 70% of units are typically sold to investors, 60 to 70. Because let's think about it, like most end users, like first-time home buyer, for example, when they've got the money, they're ready to go. Mm-hmm. They want to kind of touch, feel, get a sense of it. They're going to be living there. And so they want to kind of move in a month or two. They don't want to wait 5 or 6 years. And so these units tend to sell to investors. So obviously when rates went up, that killed sort of the investor base, and the numbers just no longer made sense. Developers were asking huge premiums. There was definitely a speculative bubble aspect to the new construction market. And so when the music stopped and rates went up, the investors disappeared. And now developers are left sort of holding the bag and saying, well, I can't sell enough pre-sale units to hit my construction financing, so I can't get off the ground.
And so are we seeing that pre-sale units are just not selling the way they used to sell?
Yeah, so if you look at the data, we can see for 2024, it was about a 4 or 5 year low in new home sales. I think, we're down about 50% from 2021 in terms of the number of units that were pre-sold. And if you look at developer balance sheet and say, well, how much units are developers still holding today, whether they're actively in construction or they're nearing completion, developers don't always sell 100% of the building. They usually keep some units. And so what we can see today is the number of units on developer balance sheets is actually at almost a 10-year high. So they've got a lot of excess inventory that they're actually sort of sitting on and needing to sell.
So this is where I think I get confused, and a lot of people who aren't in the industry get confused, because we keep hearing about, all this growth in Vancouver and demand for housing, and that's why housing prices are up. So shouldn't these units be selling? Like, I understand that perhaps, interest rates went up, but they are also coming down, and we keep being told that there's all this demand. So how do we square this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the demand, I would say, was obviously supercharged during the pandemic. When you bring in 1.2 million new, immigrants a year, there's no way you can build. I don't care what housing platform you launch. You cannot build for that capacity. We also have a lot of speculation. I think what we're seeing today is a normalization of that. And so I think it's kind of an adjustment phase that we're going through, that demand is well below long-term averages. If you look at home sales right now, we're running, March, for example, was a 20-year low in home sales outside of 2019.
Wow.
So that is not a normal set of demand, nor was 2021, 2020, 2022 in the pandemic years. So we're kind of like, we had a huge sugar high. We're kind of coming through that crash now. But I think sales activity and demand will normalize over the next, say, 24 months, 36 months. And then as you kind of get through that, we're going to start to wonder, where did all the construction go in 5-6 years from now?
This sounds like we're setting up for another crisis of like high rents, high housing costs because the availability isn't there because we don't have new units online. So is that what we're going to see in 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I think the reality is like you cannot arrest economic gravity. All these politicians are coming out and saying, well, I'm going to build 500,000 homes a year and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. The reality is the numbers don't pencil. And so if you can't get the capital to be deployed, the projects don't get built. So there's not a whole lot, truthfully, in my opinion, that the policymakers can do today. This cycle will play itself out. And so we will sow the seeds for your next sort of shortfall. And so what we're seeing now is the market is shifting away from these glitzy, high-rise, fancy towers. And developers are actually building stuff that actually economically pencils today, where there is a demand. And that demand you're seeing today is in duplexes, multiplexes, ground-oriented wood frame construction, which is cheaper to build. And there's a real demand because we haven't been building 3-bedroom.
So this sounds good. It sounds like it's actually units for families and
there's some benefit coming out of it. The benefit is I think developers are being forced to build sort of more family style housing as opposed to these micro, Ron Butler will call them dog crate condos in the sky. These 450 square foot 1-bedroom units that sell to the investor and they maximize the rent. Those projects are just no longer economically viable, and so they're not getting built.
20 seconds or less. Who can I blame for this scenario?
I think the BC government takes a little bit of it for, I think, attacking sort of the investor and the speculator, and they've come out recently and said that. I think at the end of the day, the Bank of Canada, of course, they were a bit late to raise interest rates, but that killed the market. And I think just everybody in general, the collective us, for speculating like crazy in 2021, 22, and pushing prices to unbelievable highs.
Plenty of blame to go around, Steve. Thanks so much for your time tonight.
Thanks for having me on.
Folks, follow him on social media. He's a wealth of knowledge and analysis. He is, of course, real estate aficionado Steve Saretsky. Now, after some business, let's talk about one of the uglier aspects of housing, evictions. If you're a renter, Kyla Lee will tell you all about your rights up next.